All right, guys, so this is a video explaining homework 7. So with the first homework after spring break, we're going to go through some different data sources that you're going to use. So let's get right into it. I will share. This is the document that you'll be turning in, and there's a spreadsheet that goes along with it that we'll get to as we move forward. So the basic idea on this homework 7 is that you work for an environmental economic consulting firm, and you've been hired to evaluate the effects of future demand growth on wildlife habitat. Specifically, your client wants you to look at the United States, so a developed country, China, a nearly developed country, and Tanzania, an undeveloped country. For your firm's report to the client, you've been asked to provide a brief quantitative analysis looking out in the future to 2050. And you're going to provide the following data for the report. And then I've got 3 sections here. You can see the tables laid out. So what I'm going to do in this video is go through how you get all this data, how you would use the spreadsheet, and basically answer this question. So first one here, as a proxy for forest demand growth, you're going to be required to project what we call apparent consumption for the 3 countries. So apparent consumption is calculated as the production. In this case, we're going to look at sawnwood, so things like lumber. Production plus imports, so what you make in the country plus what comes into the country minus the exports, what goes out of the country. And then we assume it's apparent that that's what was consumed. And we're going to get historic data from the UN Food and Agricultural Organization Forest Data Database. So that's this FAO stat link. So let's do that first. So if we click on that link, and so I think we can just do control click, and then we switch over, we should be able to see where we've taken this data. But first, let's talk about where we're going to take it to. It's going to be into the spreadsheet that you have that goes along with it. And all of these cells here in the yellow are what we're going to fill in. So we have this UN Food and Agricultural Organization softwood apparent consumption. We're going to put those values in here from 1961 down to the latest, which is 2019. We'll go in these yellow columns. This stuff over here we'll talk about when we get there, right? But we're going to fill all this in, and we're going to get these graphs over on the right that you see pop up. Those are going to fill with data as we do it, right? So let's go see if we got that link to, where was it? So let's go get the link. I don't know why it didn't just click to it, but let's see, our homework. I will copy and paste it. How's that? Open hyperlink. Okay, so now we should be looking at the FAO stat data coming up. And so here it is, forest production and trade. And we have 4 different columns, or I guess boxes here, that we can look at things. So first we have countries, elements, items, and years. And we're going to need to fill out all 4 of those. So first, let's start with countries, right? We can click down. We know that we need China. And then if we go way down that list, we know that we need the United States and United States of America and the United Republic of Tanzania. So there's a footnote that says sometimes it's Tanzania, sometimes you have to look for United Republic of Tanzania. So for our parent consumption, it was a production quantity plus an import quantity minus an export quantity. So we've got those selected. And then we're going to want to get sawnwood. And here we're going to click items aggregated. And we're going to go down and get sawnwood. And we're going to use sawnwood total. So if we just did items, we could get coniferous and non-coniferous, but then we'd have to add them together. And so this aggregated items is just a little easier in that it does that for us. And then for years, right, we've got 1961 to present. We can just do select all. And now I've got my selections. I can go download data. And I'm downloading this data now. And so it's going to ask me here, what do I want to do? I want to open it in Excel. And so I do OK. So now let's stop share here and we'll go over to Excel and we should have some FAO data now. And so here we have this ugly looking data that comes in that relates production. If I scroll down, which is what I'm doing, I get import quantities, export quantities. This is for China. If I go down even farther, I've got the same thing for the United Republic of Tanzania and for the United States of America below that. One thing to note, though, is that the data isn't always complete. And so I want to know that I have data for every single year because I'm going to do something simple and add it. And so here I'm going to do something typing equals if this thing over here. So if J2 equals 1961, I'm going to say, I want this thing to say 1961. Otherwise, I want it to take the year before plus 1, right? And if I do enter, it's going to say 1961. I can now copy this all the way down my sheet. I'm going to use this to make sure I have data in every year. So if I do that all the way down and I Control V, I've pasted it. And here I've got my formula. Here I've got the year that came out of the database that we have. And I can just scroll down and look. So by 2019, right, I've got all production data for China. By 2019 for the import quantity, I've got all my data. For 2019 of the exports, I've got all my data. Now I'm into Tanzania production, right? 2019, if it lines up, it's good. I come down on my import quantities and you can see it's not lining up, or sorry, my export quantities. My import quantities, by the time I get to 2019, it's not lining up. So I know I'm missing data in there. And so I have to figure out where. And so here, if I scroll up, I see that I'm missing data in there. And so since I want to just use a simple formula, I need to insert some columns here. So I need to insert columns for 1975, 76, 77, 78, 79, 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 86. And I can also see that I'm missing some down here for 87, sorry, 88, 89, 90, and 91. Now, if I copy my little formula here and I just drag it down to there, right, it's going to populate that again. So I'm checking again now to see that I've got all these numbers represented. Now it matches there. Now it matches there. So really it was only imports in Tanzania. We've got all the data for the United States, right? We can check that. Now I know that all my data is there. And when I use a simple formula, it will calculate correctly. So I'm gonna delete this column so that I can put some things there. And I'm gonna say for the US, apparent consumption is going to equal, and now I have to scroll down to where I have the US. In 1961, it is production plus imports in 1961 minus exports in 1961. Enter. Right? So that's my apparent consumption for China. And why was I doing the United States first? It's because in that other sheet, it's laid out United States, China, Tanzania. So I'm trying to match things up to make things easier for myself. Okay, so for China, right, apparent consumption is going to be production plus 1961 imports minus 1961 exports, enter. And when I'm doing it for Tanzania, I've got to do the same thing. So equals, and if I scroll down to where I get to Tanzania, I've got this plus imports, imports in 1961 minus exports in 1961. And because I did all those columns that I put in, it now lines up, right? So enter. And now I've got my apparent consumption. I can copy this formula and all the way down from 1961 to 2019, right? I can paste. I've got that formula, and now I have my apparent consumption of sawnwood in each of these countries. So I can go in here and I can copy it, right? Just Control C in that case. I can switch over now to my Homework 7 spreadsheet, and I can say, I'm going to right click, and I'm just going to paste the numbers in there. And so because I did here, US, China, Tanzania, when I paste them, it's going to fill this value. So an interesting thing here is we have negative apparent consumption in some cases for Tanzania. I wouldn't worry about that. That's just bad data. Tanzania doesn't have a lot of good data related to sawnwood consumption. That's important to note for your client too, that maybe the data for Tanzania isn't as trustworthy as it is for China or the United States. Okay, so that gives me my production, or sorry, apparent consumption, right? And so I can come over and I can look at my historic stuff is now populated. So US apparent consumption, Chinese apparent consumption, 1960 to 2020, and Tanzanian apparent consumption with the bad years here of data, or I have it over here for the different economic cases. We'll get to that when we get there. But now we have our historic consumption of sawnwood for the 3 countries that we care about for this particular study. And now we need to look at GDP. And GDP, we're going to look at projections into the future. And so let's get out of here. So if I stop share here and I go back to my Word document that is my homework, right? So now I've got my apparent consumption. Now I have to be looking at GDP projections here from the US Energy Information's International Energy Outlook. And in this case, right, this International Energy Outlook, so if we copy this thing, I think I have a link here that I need to, this one here, right, is the one that we want to do to get all of them. I'll fix this when you get it, and we would go and follow that link. So stop share, and we'll go look at where we went to. Microsoft, quit screwing with me down there. In our browser, we went to this. This is the Annual Energy Outlook. We did not do a full annual energy outlook in 2020 through COVID or whatever, right? We just we did a couple cases, but not all. I will link you directly to the 2019, which is what this is. So this is the link we have in 2019. And you can go to then the interactive table viewer. And so this is going to make it easy for us to get our data. What the International Energy Outlook is we look at how energy consumption in the future across the world is going to play out through 2050. We use that for our policy. You'll notice a lot of climate policies related to 2050. That's why we extend it out to there. Right, that energy is something that we can't live without these days. And so it's something that's important that we look at in the United States. And so we have this data table of all the energy use in the United States and other countries out through 2050. But we want to know just some certain ones. We want macroeconomic data. We want the GDP data. And so here's our GDP. And there's 2 versions of it, right? There's one expressed in purchasing power parity and another expressed in market exchange rate. Let's just go with the purchase power parity. It's a way of relating dollars in different countries. So if we click that, we get GDP projections for the world going out into the future. And we want particular cases and scenarios. So you'll notice in question 2, we're going to ask about the high economic growth and the low economic growth scenarios. And we have that. So we have a reference case, the most likely case of GDP in the future, but we also have a high economic growth case and a low economic growth case. And if we submit these things here, right, we get what that will look like. So this is the Americas, these are the developed countries, the OECD countries. We get projections out to 2050. If we page down here, we can see that we have these things for all the different countries, United States, Canada, Mexico, Chile. You go down, right, you can find China, Russia, all these other countries. Their GDP projections out through 2050. So let's take this information and let's download it. And in this case, I want to download it to a CSV, to a common delimited table of data that I can look at in, again, opening it in Excel, because that's where I'm going to take all this data. So if I click OK, I can stop share there. I go to Excel to where that opened up. And here they are, the world gross domestic product. So if I double click that, we're looking at what that sheet is. Okay, and I may want to drag this column out so I can see what we're looking at. And it's what I had on that sheet, the website, the United States, right? So this is GDP. Right now we're sitting somewhere in the, this is pre-COVID when they did this. As I said, they didn't do it in 2020. So we're a little off in terms of the data there. But this is the reference case. And if I grab that data from 2010 to 2050 and I copy it, I can stop share and thanks Microsoft, share it, and I can come over here and I can paste it. So a reference case GDP 2010 to 2050, it's yellow, I'm going to be filling it in. I can put the cursor there, I can say paste special and values that I'm going to get and transpose. And so transposing it just means I'm taking something that was a horizontal row of data and I'm going to make it a vertical column of data. And when I paste like that, I get GDP projections out through 2050. And so I'll go back and I will grab that data for the other one. So remember we saw the reference case. Now I'm copying, you probably can't see it, over in my other spreadsheet, getting my high economic growth case, and I'm gonna be back in here, and this is where I'm gonna put it. I'm gonna paste special again, right? Values, transpose, okay. That's the high economic growth for the United States. And I will do the same for the low economic growth case for the United States. I don't think you can see this sheet that I'm in, but you can see it when I bring it back. So I'm just copying from that other sheet into here, and I'm doing paste special always, right? Values transpose, because I'm taking those things and pasting them in here. So we'll go back and we'll look. I'm just going to go through this for all those different things. So, right, that was the United States. I copied that last one. I come down, I find China, right? These are China's. You can do this however you want. If you find a faster way, you want to copy and paste them differently, whatever, right? But we're just grabbing the different data and we're putting it in that other sheet, transposing it so that it goes horizontal. Okay, so when we get all of that done, let's stop share and screen share. Right, we'll have them all filled in. Right, so all that copying and pasting has been done here. And if we're looking at this other, our original worksheet, right, it's got, we're going to use what's called income elasticities. And income elasticities are basically what a 1% change in GDP will give you in terms of a percent change in consumption of a particular item. And so this is work by a guy named Joseph Bongiorno from the University of Wisconsin, where he's done some statistics, and we've seen that an income elasticity for sawnwood is 0.22. So a 1% change in GDP leads to a 0.22% change in consumption. And we're going to use that piece of information and our projections of GDP going forward in the future to project sawnwood consumption in the future. So if we go back into our worksheet where we've got all these values pasted, you can see these italics. I've done that for you here. I've created looking at how much GDP changed in this particular year and using that 0.22 elasticity to project what the change in consumption should be, right? And so that's what all of these are here. They've taken our original sawnwood consumption, the projections of GDP, and they're using that elasticity to project consumption of sawnwood forward. And we can look at graphs of that over on the right. And we can see here, for example, with US, right, here's what our consumption of sawnwood has been. This is the Great Recession, the housing collapse in the 2008, right, went way down and it's come back a bit. Here it is. And then we have projections going forward using our GDP projections in both a reference case, a high economic growth case, and a low economic growth case. So pretty tight in this particular case. They were wider in the past, but this particular 2019 projection of high and low economic growth really has that tight for the United States. There's a little more variability when you look at China and you look at their consumption through 2020. You can see rapid growth in the 2000s. And if you think of what happened in our consumption and what happened in their consumption, it actually saved the industry in the region for the most part to be shipping to China at that point. And then we have projections going forward. And down here, Tanzania, of course, so we had the bad data, but then we have low projections going forward. We can look for each particular case, the reference case, the 3 different countries. And what this shows you is around 2013, China became a bigger consumer of sawnwood than the United States. And it's projected to continue on that path going forward. Part of that's related to how many people there are, not necessarily how developed they are, but how many people there are. So we've got 300 million people or so, a little more than that now. They've got 1.3 billion people. And so 300 million compared to 1.3 billion, there's a lot more of them. And as they develop, they start to consume more like we consume, right? There's a lot fewer people in Tanzania and they don't have a lot of money to buy that sawnwood. Their big thing actually with wood products, if our client had asked us, would be charcoal and energy use of heating. So for heating the house or for heating food, right? But we have for each particular case, now we have what the consumption is. You can see they look similar, but the scale's a little different, right? There's our graph. What I've also done on this sheet is as you come down here and you look at where we've projected out from 2020 through 2050, I've calculated some values here. So this first one is just taking the 2050 value minus the 2020 value and giving us what that number is, and same thing out through here. And so you'll use those numbers in your sheet. So if we go back now and we look at that sheet, you have the data to be able to fill in these tables. What was the apparent sawnwood consumption in cubic meters for 1961, 2019, and 2050? And this should say 2019 to 2050, right? We're going to look at what is the change going to be. Those are the values that we calculated down below. And then they want to know under different GDP growth scenarios. We brought in that GDP growth data, right? How much under the reference case, the high economic growth, percentage change, and total cubic meters change. So those are those values that are in your spreadsheet down there. So you're going to be looking at how much additional sawnwood demand just in these 3 countries under these 3 different scenarios we're going to see looking out through 2050. So that should get you through 1 and 2. For number 3, we're going to use World Bank environmental indicators. So the World Bank has a whole bunch of data that they keep out on their website. And we're going to go to that website and fill in these values. So in the United States, we have mammals, birds, and fish. We're going to want to know how many threatened species there are in these 3 countries that we're looking at. And so if we follow this link and we go share, we're over now at the World Bank data site, and they have all sorts of indicator data that they look at, but we're going to go down and look at the environmental indicators, and that's here. So scrolling down the page, and you'll notice that we have fish threatened species, mammal threatened species, and bird threatened species. And if you click on that, right, it's going to take you to the latest data that we have from each of these countries on threatened species. And so you can scroll down, you're going to get China, 96 threatened bird species. You'll go down farther and you'll find Tanzania right there, 49 threatened bird species, and the United States, 91 threatened bird species. You'll do the same thing for mammals and for fish. And you'll go back and plug that data into your table here. So now you've got information on consumption of wood. You've got projections of that consumption out to 2050. You've got how many threatened species we have in these 3 countries currently. And here you have, in 100 words or less, what does your research tell you about habitat concerns through 2050? So 100 words or less. I want it concise, and just what does this data show you? This is real data. I mean, this is stuff that I hope you go out on the internet, you can find this sort of stuff. It's conservation is determined by consumption, and the degree to which we conserve things is the degree to which we can fill people's needs across the world, not just the United States. We're a rich country into the future. So that's the video that I have for you showing what that homework is. I'm available for questions if you have it, and good luck.